Go ahead.
Good evening. This is Chuck Richardson again. I'm going to comment on the impact of our current president on the country. Whether a Republican or a Democrat wins, the damage has already been done to this country. We have almost lost all of the tenets, the culture, and the precepts of democracy upon which this country was founded. He has divided our nation almost to the extent that it was divided during the Civil War. And he's raised the spectacle of white superiority again. He's backed these groups, these paramilitary groups. We've lost all those things because half of the nation thinks and believes what he believes. And he is very tactfully dividing our nation. He has split us because half of the people are on one side of the fence and other half are with those of us who still believe in saving democracy. Mr. Trump, he went against the congressional committee requesting information from him that no president has ever done. He defied the rule of law. And he even talked about a president being able to pardon himself. That has nothing to do with fairness. That has nothing to do with the precept that this country was founded upon. And Mr. Trump has already committed these acts. And the reason he's done it is for his personal quest for power. And it doesn't matter to them whether you're a Democrat or Republican. It is all about Donald Trump. Any man who believes that it is all right to grab a female by her private parts. Any man who believes that it's all right to derange families and take their children away from their parents. Any man who believes it's all right to stand on a stage next to Vladimir Putin, our staunch enemy, and side with him against his fellow Democrats and call his countrymen the problem that they committed a crime and side with our enemy. That's a treasonous act, and people need to understand that Mr. Trump is attempting to curtail the impact of democracy and set about to proceed under his own laws, not the rule of law, but the rule of his laws. And now, want to lose, he wants to actually take the issue where the people have voted. He wants to put it in a court that he picked. He is attempting to undermine democracy, and whether you agree with him or his policies, you need to realize that he is tampering with a system that has been intact for 200 years. And when you look at the essence of his approach, which is all about himself, when you look at that, you realize that if the shoe were on the other foot and the Democrats were in power, how would the Republican feel if one Democrat despot who's a tyrant wants to do things his way and disregard the rules that protect Democrats and Republicans? They would then be suffering. And what Mr. Trump has done was to take our system and turn it to his political advantage for personal power and a quest to remain in power and break any law, violate any rule, do whatever he wants to do. And sadly, we don't have any Republican senators like Barry Goldwater. Barry Goldwater, I never agreed with policy. But Barry Goldwater was a good man. Goldwater was a good man. He went to Richard Nixon and said, "Dick, you messed up. Now you got to go." We don't have one Republican senator with the courage to go to Mr. Trump and say, "Donald, Johnny boy, you tried to bribe a foreign president by holding back money, by holding back the dollars that would have protected the lives of those people if they didn't investigate Hunter Biden." It's clear and not one Republican would stand up. Now, they may not feel the effects of what they did during that impeachment, but their children are going to be embarrassed when history says that all those Republicans wouldn't stand up and exercise the backbone God gave them, that they fell into the power of Mr. Trump. And the sad thing about it is that we need to look at why this is happening. And unfortunately, it's about race. Mr. Trump has so bent on keeping the heel of oppression on African Americans and other minorities that he has used that mantra to coerce good, innocent white people into following him on the basis of his anti-black posture, but they're supporting him and going behind him thinking he's a good leader. And when they see that what he is doing is for his personal quest for power and has nothing to do with the good of the country, they will see that most of us and the Democrats are standing up for democracy. And Trump is standing up for himself. Now, having said that, we need to make sure that we are mindful of the barriers that Trump is creating. Too many people in America, black, white, Democrats, Republicans, independents, too many of them are good intended, fair-minded, strong-hearted people who want this country to be good like we used to be fair, to be known as a person or a country of charity. We have a mean image now. We have a hatred, divisive arrogance to us that the whole world is watching. And the people, black, white, Republican, Democrat, good or bad, they need to recognize that this is not about Donald Trump. This is about saving the tenets of democracy. It's bigger than one election. It's about whether in 5 or 6 years we will be able to look back and say, yes, no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, no matter whether you're rich or poor, you have to follow the rules. That's what America has always been about. And what we have now is one man who has said, I'm not going to follow the rules. And because the citizens of America have been so frustrated over all of the falsehoods and shenanigans and trickery that politicians have sold to, they will sell or buy anything to get out of that rut. But Mr. Trump, with the intentions of doing good, has really divided us, and we're headed for some bad times. Anytime a president would send a message to paramilitary, right-wing, radical people, the KKK, to call them good people. Anytime you have a man leading and sending out a message that says, stand down but stand by, that was a key message to those people. In other words, stand by for my next order. Stand by until I tell you to go to the streets and oppose this election because I think it was fair. Suppose Mr. Trump wins the election. Is he still going to criticize the fact that it was bad voting? What is he going to do then? Suppose somebody else says, well, Mr. Trump, we agree. There was cheating, so we're not going to stand by and let you elect. And he's doing this in advance. And people are so naive, so gullible, that they're sitting by watching him pull this shenanigan on us. And we're just going along like the slobbering masses. Do-de-do-de-do-do. We need to wake up because the hour is late and it's more serious than we realize because people are willing to do almost anything for him. And just like he said during the first part of his election, he can shoot somebody on Madison Avenue and get away with it. And he really believes that. Don't think he was joking. He believes that. Don't you?
Mr. Richardson, what are your thoughts on where we are right now in the mayoral race here in Atlanta? I mean, not Atlanta, Richmond, Virginia.
Well, I think, sadly, very sad. The current mayor has been affected by this culture of arrogance. And he's attempted to do what he wanted to do, and the council really has the power. And the council has not exercised this power because the council actually with 5 votes determined ultimate policies in Richmond. But somehow that culture of arrogance, that culture of tyranny, that culture of despots doing what they want to do has trickled down to Richmond. And I think the mayor needs to understand that he is not a dictator. And hopefully we will be able to bring some, maybe he will learn, maybe he will get a grasp, because he's not dumb, he's a smart kid, he's a little inexperienced, but he can do right if he gets his heart right. If you don't care about, one of the things that happens in local, can you hear him?
Mm-hmm.
In
Sure.
local government, is that when people get in office, this high octane of information flowing, and the adoration, the glorification, and the praise that council members get, it gets to them. And if they aren't stable and know who they are, they will become taken in. They see letters coming to their house addressed to the honorable, see themselves on television, read their names in the paper, and they become taken in. You succumb not to flattery, and you won't be crushed with criticism. These people today are taken by flattery. They start believing their own press, their own ink. And they need to understand that when you go to public office, you go in there to serve. I served for 19 years, and the people were always my priority. I always shared the power with them. I always asked them, what should I do? I wasn't a dictator to tell them what they ought to do. And I think there is an arrogance and an egotistical image that people have, that they're really losing sight and perspective of what you're supposed to do as an elected official.
How do we come back to morality? How do we come back to individuals in terms of what's needed in the community? How do we bring...
There's a saying that the events are in the saddle and they ride mankind. There are going to be certain events that occur that's going to shake us back into a perspective of understanding that we're all human beings living here under the same umbrella of fear, under the same group of individuals who have aspirations, and sometimes their egos become totally out of perspective. But events like this coronavirus, this has changed us. No man had anything to do with that. That coronavirus was an event, and it's beginning to have its effect on people. And if things came to a point where people had to take a good, strong look at how desperate the situation is, it would cause people to change. But no one heroic man is going to stand up and, like Moses did, came down from the mountain. That's not going to happen. The events will dictate how people behave, how they respond to problems, whether they're fair, you know, because when the shoe is on the other foot, you get a different perspective. You know, once the Republicans found out that the numbers could flip, and if the Democrats were in office, and that's a possibility, how would you feel if you were treated like the Republicans are treating the Democrats? It's all partisanism, and it is gotten out of whack, because when a man stands on the stage and says, I have no reason not to trust Mr. Putin, and I think it was those devilish Democrats who did it, that is a man turning on his own countrymen.
If we look at where we are right now in this country, how do we educate the youth to get them out to vote.
Well, it might be that how the youth educating us, they are ahead of the learning curve. People talk about weed. LeVar, I'm sorry, but I have to say this because it's true. Those young people were the ones who actually brought our attention to this issue. Excuse me, I have when the statues, that it was not a question it was not a question of the number of people who went for this and the number of people who didn't. It was a moral question of whether it's right or wrong to glorify and praise people who believed in slavery. And the answer was a clear, no, it's not right. Again, if you put the shoe on the other foot and tell white folk, look, suppose black people had taken some people from the Ireland, and enslaved them and brought them to America, and did what they what was done to black people. Suppose that happened, and the shoe was on the other foot. Would they want to be reminded of that ugly history and glorify the black men who raped their women, who beat their men, who hung them without trials, who took their properties, who deranged their families, men who were willing to die for those causes, taking little girls, 11, 12, 13 years old, from their virgin slumber and taking them up to his boudoir for their own beastly pleasures? That happened for 250 years. How would white people feel if black people had done that to their race? Would they want to have statues of this big brute on a horse saying, yes, we did this to your children? Now you take it, you look at these statues, you be reminded of who's the boss. That's the kind of thing that people need to think, but nobody wanted to hear the ugly truths. Nobody wanted to hear about what went on during slavery. Nobody wants to accept the fact that the heritage of which people speak, that their heritage and the culture was steeped in racism. It was steeped in glorifying people who beat men for no cause, threw them in hot batches of scalding hot water, raped their daughters and sisters and aunts in front of them. You know, for 250 years, all the slaves had to look forward to was long rows of cotton from sunup to sundown, 100-degree weather, and a rawhide whip of the slave overseer, and that was your destiny and fate. And it went on for 250 years, and we want to stand by and allow men to force us to see symbols that represented that and say nothing? What about my dignity?
In closing, what would you like to say, and what is the word of wisdom?
I have one theory that I try to practice and live by. It ain't complicated. And that, you know, it's whatever religion you want to pick, whatever belief, there's only one rule that we really need to live by, and things would be all right. It would allow peace, harmony, love, mutual respect, fairness, justice, and we will have peace. And that rule is, do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
And on
It's real simple.
And on that note, thank you, Mr. Richardson.
Send that mother out. God, that'll be good, man. You need to get that on.